my dreams will never come unless I chase it. I've been feeling hella lazy, need to push up on myself. Guilty conscience keep me waiting on some help. Basically, I had insecurities. Mentally, I was killing myself, constantly running from my memory. Apparently, I was dealing with anxiety. Like, what is this inside of me? How do I identify it? Gotta get it out of me. I just wanna be free. If you ride with me, that's okay, that's on me. You can be yourself, you ain't gotta lie to me. I could come and slide you, I could be your pilot tonight. We gon' live like we're never gonna see. A broadside, chillin' on the mountaintop. We just wanna joyride, we only live one life. Lot of niggas terrified, don't wanna live a lie. Oh yeah, if you wanna ride, that's okay, that's on me. Rest assured, I'ma be an entrepreneur. I can feel it all in my bones. You can smell it like cologne. I thank God for never letting go. I'm in the studio, getting ready for the radio. Every day I'm always making sure that I'ma work towards my goals. I just wanna make sure I'm on focus. I don't wanna be homeless again. I like a cash flow in the back row with a love bug and a lot of hugs. I've been done wrong since I was young. And it's crazy, cause that's all I really want. If you ride with me, that's okay, that's on me. You can be yourself, you ain't gotta lie to me. I could come and slide you, I could be your pilot tonight. We gon' live like we're never gonna see. A broadside, chillin' on the mountaintop. We just wanna joyride, we only live one life. Lot of niggas terrified, don't wanna live a lie. Yeah, if you wanna ride, that's okay, that's on me. That's all I really want, chillin' on the mountaintop. That's all I really want. What's up, cuzzo? Where you at? You chillin'? That's what's up. Doing you. I miss you, man. I love you, man. If you ride with me, that's okay, that's on me. You can be yourself, you ain't gotta lie to me. I could come and slide you, I could be your pilot tonight. We gon' live like we're never gonna see. A broadside, chillin' on the mountaintop. We just wanna joyride, we only live one life. Lot of niggas terrified, don't wanna live a lie. Oh yeah, if you wanna ride, that's okay, that's on me. I got this feeling that my dreams will never come unless I chase it. I've been feeling hella lazy, need to push up on myself. Guilty conscience keep me waiting on some help. Basically, I had insecurities. Mentally, I was killing myself, constantly running from my memory. Apparently, I was dealing with anxiety. Like, what is this inside of me? How do I identify it? Gotta get it out of me. I just wanna be free. If you ride with me, that's okay, that's on me. You can be yourself, you ain't gotta lie to me. I could come and slide you, I could be your pilot tonight. We gon' live like we're never gonna see. A broadside, chillin' on the mountaintop. We just wanna joyride, we only live one life. Lot of niggas terrified, don't wanna live a lie. Oh yeah, if you wanna ride, that's okay, that's on me. Rest assured, I'ma be an entrepreneur. I can feel it all in my bones. You can smell it like cologne. I thank God for never letting go. I'm in the studio, getting ready for the radio. Every day I'm always making sure that I'ma work towards my goals. I just wanna make sure I'm on focus. I don't wanna be homeless again. I like a cash flow in the back row with a love bug and a lot of hugs. I've been done wrong since I was young. And it's crazy, cause that's all I really want. If you ride with me, that's okay, that's on me. You can be yourself, you ain't gotta lie to me. I could come and slide you, I could be your pilot tonight. We gon' live like we're never gonna see. A broadside, chillin' on the mountaintop. We just wanna joyride, we only live one life.
Hi, peace. How is everybody this Friday? Hi, Tamiko. Hey, Doc Miller. Hey, Mama. How are you guys today? I wanted to make sure that I come in here. Y'all, my throat was gone 2 weeks ago, and it hasn't came back yet. I wanted to spend this time going over any of our last minute questions when it came to the federal workshop, as well as transitioning over into a federal role. And I have a list of questions that people have sent into our inbox. So I want to make sure we answered all of those tonight. And that way you guys have something to refer to. So I hope everybody is doing good. And this is going to be a very quick live because I don't want to. It's Friday, y'all. Admin Sin got to go get in the streets, meaning that it's restaurant week out here in, in Arizona, and I got me a little reservation plan. So let me go over all the things that we went over this week. And I want to make sure that I answered the questions that were coming up. And one of the main questions that were coming up were people who were in social service roles and customer service roles, and whether or not there's space for them in the federal government. And so I want you guys to know first and foremost that, again, the federal government has 400 different departments. And in those departments, every single role that exists in corporate America will exist in federal. Not only that, they also have their own suite of roles that are within federal that don't exist in corporate. So if you have a background as a social worker, if you have a background as a nurse, if you work in customer service, if you are a therapist, those roles also exist in the federal government. And I want to show you guys that firsthand because we have these questions come up quite some time. So to give you guys an example, I'm doing a very quick search on USAJOBS.gov, just a very quick search. And I'm just going to put in the title nurse. And right away, guess what we see? 1,457 jobs open right now that are for nurses, and 7 of them being remote. And then when we look at the departments and agencies that are hiring for it, it's not just within the, what is that called? It's not just within the health, but there's also within the Department of Agriculture, Air Force, and the Army, because the military people get sick too, right? The Department of Defense, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Interior, DOJ, Department of Labor, Legislation, the Navy, and other independents, as well as the VA, are all hiring for nurses, right? So even if you have your RN, it does not mean that you can't work within federal. Healthcare workers, social workers, we can run the same game for social workers. And you will see that, yes, social workers are hired by the federal government too. Let's see. And we could do the search together, guys. I could just put in the word social work. That's it. Nothing else. And there's actually 14,000 roles open for social workers, and over 250 of them are remote. So yes, if you work at the federal government, if you work within healthcare, if you work within social services, yes, there's roles open. And to be honest, I didn't even run this search before. I would have been told y'all 263 roles being available for social workers that are remote is chef's kiss. I promise you right now. I know some social workers right now that I should have told this information to this week. My bad. I totally forgot. Hold on. Let me see what Abria said. Tabia says, can you work for the feds and owe back taxes? Meaning if you're on a payment plan, not delinquent. Yes, Abria, if you're on a payment plan, yes. Also, when you check your credit, what are they looking for? Do you need 725? And that's a good question. So credit checks. Do they happen and how are you impacted? So when you do work for the federal government, they are going to run a background check and they will run a credit check. What are they looking for? Big crimes. What does that look like? On your credit score, they're looking to see responsibility as well as the absence of criminal activity. So responsibility, let's say for instance, you owe T-Mobile from 2010 and it was charged off, they will ask you questions about it. There is no perfect credit score to get into the federal government. You don't need a 700 plus. But if there are discrepancies, you have some phone bills or something you didn't pay in the past, they will give you an opportunity to say why. Hey, during this time, some of my bills lapsed during the pandemic. I got on payment plans for what I could. My salary wasn't what it needed to be in order for me to pay those bills, and that's fine. It's about being accountable for what your credit score is more so than the number. It's the accountability and the honesty. And the reason why is because, yes, depending on the department you're working in, you could be looking at sensitive information, American citizens. And so, how are you supposed to be trusted with that if you don't have honesty and accountability? The same thing goes with your question, Abrea, about back taxes. So, yes, if you're on a payment plan, yeah. But if you owe back taxes, you're not on a payment plan, you ain't looked at it, and you're basically escaping responsibility, then yes, it will have a negative impact on you. If you have things set up, it will not. But I'm really glad for that question. Um, Abrea. Another question that had came up was for the felons, and we addressed that earlier this week, as well as gaps on your resume. Some of you guys are asking, okay, what about if my resume has times where I wasn't employed or underemployed? Those type of things are actually safeguarded within federal government, not looked at as a bad thing. So one thing that we have to realize is that there's two things at play happening at the same time. One thing that's play is that, of course, the federal government has positions open that needs to be filled so in order so our country can run. And the second thing that's happening is a responsibility of the federal government over their citizens, which is why they have to have things in place for disabled, senior citizens, felons, people with no education, because the federal government, quote unquote, is in charge of their citizens. They have to have programs of employment open. That's the reason why during high political times, they tout how much unemployment is, because the federal government has a responsibility to their citizens. And so, because we are very colorful mixed land and we're human beings, people that are in more extreme cases or cases to where it's more difficult to find work within corporate, there has to be earmarked position within government. That's the reason why there are so many different felon programs, and the reason why the government has a big push on technology and AI. Some of the things that we're looking at the federal government, I always want to let you guys know, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. So I'm never going to be here to lie to you guys about that. The programs that are built as far as benefits are concerned, PTO, pensions, um, federal holidays that are taken off, is at the same time, as the biggest employer of the United States, they also are the representation of what employment is supposed to be in the United States. So we try to hide our shame as a country. You know, the USA always wants to tout as being number one, we're the best, we're the brightest. And so to back to back that claim, when they're giving out what is our minimum wage. Every state has a minimum wage, but guess what? The federal government has to have one too. When we talk about, well, how many days off do the normal United States citizen has? The federal government is always going to go off their standards for federal employment, so that when they're dealing with other world leaders, they're going off that. How many days off are the pension benefits within it? And so those that are in the federal government are kind of benefiting from the numbers and statistics that the government is trouting around, because they have to be the representation of what it looks like to be a US citizen, and what employment looks like, what it looks like to work here, the benefits that you'll get, the retirement age that you get. And so when Admin Joe was telling us that after 5 years of employment, you are eligible for your pension, because the federal government is saying, yeah, that's what our standard is when they're speaking. And like, yeah, we believe that after 5 years, you should be eligible to receive retirement benefits. And so the government has to protect those benefits, protect those salaries, so that when we say, what's the average salary dealing with other world leaders? What's the average salary for a nurse? They're going to go off their GS scale. What's the average salary for a social worker? They're going to go off their GS scale. And so working at the federal government, you benefit from that. because that's what they're using to trot around as why we're the best. And so every single role is available, and the transparency of the salary is available, as well as the benefits that comes with it are available, as well as the opportunities, right? So that's another reason why they don't have recruiters in federal government. That's the only role that is done with OPM, Office of Personnel Management, because everything is supposed to be transparent so that we can show how great we are. And so that's another reason why the salaries are transparent and also competitive. So when Admin Joe was showing us the other day, when we start looking at, oh, but when we get into the government, that's when you don't have high pay. Yeah, corporate America's salary starts to be more than what you will get in federal once you're at the PhD and doctoral level. Yes, then you're going to get paid more in corporate. But on no education to high school diploma to some college to bachelor's to master's, those roles, when looked at role for role with the federal government, is either the same, right? Or you'll make more by switching to federal. Okay. And that's another reason why, when it comes to being fired by the government, number one, they don't need another cancel case. The last thing that needs to happen is someone accuses the Department of Interior of having racial motivations on why they were fired, right? So that's another reason why there's so many protections for their employees, because the government's not protecting you because they love you. The government is protecting you for their treaty agreements. And so that when they're on stages with other world leaders and making negotiations, we're backing it off of federal government, especially since we are, and I forget the exact wording, you guys will be able to tell me. It starts with the C, capitalism, right? And because we allow a free trade market and companies are able to charge what they want when it comes to their products and services, and they're essentially able to pay what they want. When we really think about it, as long as you don't go beneath federal government minimum wage standards, employers truly do rule, companies do rule and state, right? We have our big tech companies who say this is how much we're going to pay for an analyst, right? But those numbers are predetermined by their market. The federal government has to have a market too. And we can't go into these conversations in government and official spaces saying, well, if you're a nurse in California, you'll make this. But if you're nursing out there in Florida, you're going to make this. We can't go in like that. No. In the United States of America, we pay our registered nurses this amount minimum. And that is stated on our GS scale. That's how that conversation is going. And so that's where the protections come in at. So let me go to the comments. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Yeah, and we really don't even know it. We really don't know how that works when it comes to that federal government process and how they're using it on their back end. And I think that sometimes when I look at careers and you guys are like, well, wow, Sin, how did you come up with that? I always begin with the end in mind. So even before we built out our federal leg, that was a very big portion of trying to figure out, well, where did this GS scale come from and how is it used? How are we determining these salaries? How is the federal government coming up with that? Even the access to remote roles. So if you worked in federal before the pandemic, you can attest that the amount of remote roles that were available were large, like dramatically less than post-pandemic. Wow, once we came out of the pandemic and during the pandemic, there was so many companies who moved their workspace over to remote. And so for the federal government to talk about, well, this is how many remote roles are available within the US, and this is how great work-life balance came, it meant that they also had to back that. Now, there were always roles available remotely, but the federal government has to top it. We have to have something to bargain with. We have to have something to stand on. And so that's where a lot of that comes in at. as well as hiring people with no high school diploma, things like that. We have a responsibility. Government does, Uncle Sam does. They have a responsibility over you as a citizen. That's it. And it's a group, right? And not to get too nuanced, but just to get a little nuance. When you are having I could say from my own experience. Let's say, for instance, you have a case to where it's being tried by a prosecutor, right? It will say the state of Arizona against this person, right? If they're facing felony charges. So at felony charges level, not if you go sue somebody, but if the police pick you up and you have a charge coming, right? It's going to be the state of Arizona against that person. So the state of Arizona against Miller, right? It is a state, and it says the state of Arizona. It's not saying that the judicial and the government branches that we put in place is actually protecting the law of the land, but the people that's within that state. It's the state of Arizona against you, right? When you get a federal charge, when Diddy did it, those federal government say the people against him, right? The people, right? Because the federal government represents the people of this land. And so for me to represent the people, I have to protect the people. I have to have things in place for the people so that I can say, this is what I'm doing for the people of the land. To give you that example in better detail, because y'all know I love a good court case. When we're looking at the United States of America against Sean Combs, the United States, the people, right? So at that point, yes, y'all, I read that full indictment. I've been deep into it, but that's to give you an example of why when you are dealing with, and like I told you, how we even built out our federal leg, when we were dealing with people in extreme crises who need help right away, homeless women, hey, Amundsen, I'm a single mom. I have 4 kids. I went through a terrible divorce, domestic violence. Me and my kids are at the homeless shelter. We've been there for a few years. I can't get on my feet. The first thing I'm thinking is, okay, this person needs a guaranteed job. I'm moving them to federal quickly. The direct to hire pathways, I'm moving them quickly because I know in there's going to be a lot of protections that they will get for that mother and for those children, and the benefits, the healthcare benefits, the work from home days, the PTO, the pension. This person needs direct crisis care now. You belong to the federal government. Y'all need to do something about her. That's how we're looking at it. Okay. Let me go to the little questions. Can you discuss the Schedule A component? I've worked for the free government for 12 years. I haven't seen one single person get fired, but we do have unions, so that helps a bit. Margie, that's a good point. So Margie's saying that she's been with the federal government for over a decade, 12 years, and she's never seen someone fired. That's why federal government got to do something about their people. Like, hey, right? That is something. And no, I'll talk about that portion later. I got what you meant. Tracy, yes, I do have the paperwork on the Schedule A components. Let me get it. Let me get my paperwork out. Okay, so the Schedule A components for what Miss Tracy was talking about was there are roles that are designated for persons with disabilities. There's roles that's designated for people that have, and the exact language is, it's a non-competitive hiring authority practice to appoint people with disabilities directly into their workforce, and this their direct to hire pathway. That pathway is not riddled with as much paperwork, and those roles are placed a lot quicker. and the people have to meet the minimum qualifications for that position, and they're eligible to be hired right away without competing with the general public. So that, and I'm really glad you brought that up, Tracy. And this goes further into my point about the federal government has to have protections over class of people. So if someone has been deemed disabled, whether it's a mental designation. I'm not laughing at the people. I'm laughing at my pronunciation. An intellectual one or a physical disability, the federal government has to have roles available for those persons. Recently, we had someone in the group who said that she is blind and she wanted to know what roles were available for her. The very first thing we did was run a complete analysis on direct to hire roles that were under Schedule A for persons with disabilities. And there are hundreds of roles for those who are disabled. Now, if you are physically disabled, you already have those paperwork. A lot of times people's questions are around psychiatric diagnosis that will make them clinically disabled. And I pray to God I had that verbiage right. And that's a psychiatric disability or an intellectual one. As long as you have your paperwork from your doctor that has deemed you that. There are Schedule A, which is what Miss Tracy's talking about, but basically roles that are designated to where you don't have to go through the competitiveness of it, to where, hey, I'm competing against these 6 persons who don't have these disabilities. No, these are roles that are earmarked, set aside, guaranteed, put into place for people who have those disabilities, so the federal government can never be accused of, well, you got roles out for everybody, but you don't got no roles for those that are disabled. No, 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 no. If you're disabled, we got these roles for you. Give me your paperwork. We have a direct to hire process. We're going to get you in right away. Because again, they cannot be accused of racism. They can't be accused of not having roles for those people. They can't be accused of that. Are you an ableist? We can't accuse the federal government of being ableist when it comes to employment, right? We can't accuse the federal government of being racist when it comes to salaries, right? So that's the reason why those processes are extremely transparent. Uncle Sam ain't one of them problems. But thank you so much for that question, Tracy. I forgot to mention that. Bina said, I work for a state government. Can that help me in some way land a federal government position? No. Yes and no. No, as far as will it give you a leg up, because then that's the federal government showing favoritism, right? And we can't have that. But yes, in the process of a lot of your background check and things are already done. And so there are pathways from state to federal that are created, but it won't give you a leg up within competing with the public. So it's the same thing with those with disabilities, right? So those Schedule A, those roles that are earmarked for people that are disabled, there are pathways that are created from state to federal, and those pathways lead for a very efficient system for those who are in state who want to move to federal. But no, for the general public roles, your state, you can't slam that. You get what I mean? You can't put that on the table. So that's the gray area. There's a pathway for you, but there's not like, well, I'm in state and the person that's interviewing, no, we got these roles for you. You in state, you want to go to federal, go down this pathway. That way, these people over here can't accuse of us of something. Y'all ain't ate all day. Um, Ashley said, I know that Progressive has things like this in place. Yes, they do. I saw another question. Which department help pay student loans? I need one of those for sure. Now, Abrea, it's not about what department, but what roles. And so let me go ahead and pull up Joe's notes on student loans. Student. Joe. Let me go through her paperwork for tomorrow. Okay, she has a link back to the federal government's website. State local government. Okay, that's one of the most. So yes, it's based off of the role, not the department, because these for those student loan repayments, it's available in every single department depending on the role. So the federal student loan repayment program permits all agencies to repay federal insured student loans as a recruitment or retention incentive for candidates or current employees. So it depends on the role, and that's going to be listed under the benefits. But thank you for, yes, that's a good question. What I'll do is, as the roles, the ones that are going to be shown tomorrow, with Joe, it looks like she has linked them. And by department, she has, I don't have this in the Excel spreadsheet, but I'm looking at maybe about 300. Yeah, because I see the last count was 260. So yeah, she has about 300 listed of the roles that are paying for that. And that's a good thing, because a lot of times even former employees or current employee, not former, current employees of the federal government, they can then be eligible for that repayment program. So say for instance, they came in and their package did not include that, they can then ask for that in the office of the OPM. Will then see if they're approved depending on their agency and department and their departmental needs. So if you're in a position that they don't want to lose you, which is most of them, you then can go through their Office of Personnel Management to ask that. Okay. 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 Let me see any other questions. I'm glad that happened. We talked about Schedule A. We talked about not getting fired. We talked that every single role is available. I know, Brea. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, y'all. And we do still have a few slots open. I know that people have they payday Friday, so I did link it at the bottom. If anybody is still going to be joining, I will be there as well. So again, it's way more protections than not. And I also want you guys to always remember there are 400 departments and they are the biggest employer. And a lot of times our community, we lean into fear mongering. We know that one cousin, that one auntie, that one uncle who worked at the federal government who has that one story that they'd be like, girl, it's real hard to get into the government. You know, it takes months. They didn't know about the direct hire placement. They didn't know about Schedule A. They didn't know about the pathway. They didn't know that if you are a graduate, if you graduated any degree that you've had at any time, if you graduated after that, the 2 years after graduation, so the first 2 years after you graduate, there are roles earmarked for you. So if you just got a job in June, you can apply, and there are roles that have direct pathways because you just graduated in the last 2 years. So that's another section that's direct hire. You're placed in 30 days or less. If you are Schedule A, you are a person with disability, whether that's intellectual or physical. Intellectual, we didn't talk about that, right? There's direct pathways. So there are several different pathways in, but you talk to that one auntie who applied for that one job within the federal government and they say, oh, you need to know somebody to get in. That's not true. There's no such thing as I knew somebody and so I got in. There's not even a place on the application because your resume is your application. There's no place for references. There's no place to say, well, I know who you call it over there. No, they don't ask you for those references until after you're in the interviewing process. So you can't know somebody in federal to get in either. It has to be a transparent and fair process that reflects the lies that we tell other governments. Okay? We talk about we the land of the free, that we're fair and just. We got to have something that's backing that up. It got to be that. Um, let's see what else I see here. Tracy said, how difficult is it to get a federal or state job at an older age? I've been in the insurance field and would like to start another career path. Tracy, that's a good question. There is a schedule for that. If you're a senior citizen, there are direct pathways as well as roles that are earmarked for senior citizens because that is a protected class. So if you were If you belong to a protected class, like senior citizens, persons with disabilities, federal government has to have something in place for you. So it's actually an easier route, and there are roles that are going to protect you in that. But that's a good question, Tracy. I'm currently overseas working as a government contractor. How far ahead should I start applying for GS positions in the US? Raven, it depends on what your goals are. So if you are within, let's say, a field that is, especially as a government contractor, you probably are. If you're in a field that to where we're needing people, like right now, they're big push in tech and AI that they've been building out since 2019, and there's 75,000 roles that they're trying to hire, you can get direct placed, right? But a good safe measure is 60 days, 60 to 90 days. If you know that you're going to be back home within the next 60 to 90 days, I would say start your process now. Margie said there are also sub-departments under the major agencies. Absolutely, Margie. Thank you for reminding me. So there are 400 major departments, but there are sub-agencies right underneath, which makes it one of the biggest. Let me tell you how many. Every single year, the federal government is actually responsible for 2.87 million federal employees. And that is about 2% of US workers work for the federal government. So at the end of 2022, we were at 3 million roles. The federal government employs over 2 million people who provide a wider range of critical services to the American public. So there's over 2 million people that they are employing per year. Okay. There is no age limit. There is a age begin for you to be able to be eligible for pension benefits and for retirement, which I believe Admin Joe said was 57 or 56, but there is no age limit. Okay. Okay. So I'm glad this kind of clears some of those questions up. You do guys have some really good questions. So let's recap. Is there an age limit to work in the federal government? No. Is it more difficult to work in the federal government because you're a senior citizen? No, it's actually a little bit easier because there has to be roles that are earmarked for you. What happens if you have a disability? If you have a disability that has been given to you by a doctor and you have paperwork on it, you can go for Schedule A roles. Those roles are roles to where they're direct to hire, to where you're actually not competing with people who are not disabled, right? So we can't have people who are abled and disabled competing for the same roles. No, there are roles that are earmarked for persons with disabilities, and those roles, there are no competition with the general public. And those roles you'll be able to apply to under Schedule A. Those roles do not mean you'll have a lower salary. Those roles just have additional benefits and cares put in to make sure there are supportive services so that you are able to work in a fair and just space. Are there remote roles? Yes. Are there roles for healthcare workers and social workers? Yes. Can I carry my title into federal? That's what the real question is. Yes, it can. Now, I did forgot to touch on teachers too, because that's another one that comes up. Yes, even the role of a teacher. So again, I didn't do anything fancy. All I did was put in teacher and I clicked search. There are teachers, first grade teachers, second grade teachers, third grade teachers, substitute teachers, science and English, Navajo teachers, to where if you work for the federal government, there are roles available, including remote. And those roles are available within the Department of Agriculture. They need teachers in the Army. They need teachers in commerce. There's 165 teachers needed for the Department of Defense. There's 4 teachers needed for Human Resources, Homeland Security, Department of Interior, Department of Justice, Legislative, Department of the Veteran Affairs, the VA. So even the role of a teacher, yes, that role. There's 264 little teacher jobs out there right now in federal government. So can I carry my title into federal? Yes. Can I carry my civilian resume? No. You have to have a federal resume, but yes, you can take your title in with you over there to federal. Felon friendly. Yes. The government has to. They are required to. You know what I think about sometimes to make it easier on you guys? And it sounds weird, and I don't mean no disrespect because I'm religious. I'm a Muslim and I used to be Christian. You know how they say God can do everything but lie? That's how y'all got to look at the federal government. Y'all got to employ everybody except for murderers, except for and criminal masterminds get employed, right? Think of the movie Catch Me If You Can. If you ain't murder nobody, the federal government should have a job for you. Y'all can do everything but hire murderers and extreme big ones. I don't want to get the video deleted. Big cases, right? Big ones. So the people we don't want in society, no, you can't hire those people, right? You serving a life sentence, you didn't touch something you wasn't supposed to touch on someone of not your appropriate age range. No, we ain't got no jobs for you. But you're a felon, you got caught burglary, you served your time. That's what the government says when you sign your release papers, right? Was that you were put into prison to do what? To serve your time and to pay your dues to society. So the federal government cannot look at your felony as a negative and say, no, we can't hire you here. No. That's not what you said. You said that I need to serve my time. And on top of that, you did what? You gave me vocational training. You gave me degrees in prison. You upskill and trained me in prison. So that means you told me, or you put me under the guise that if I had education and that I served my time, that I was eligible to be hired. And so if the government is telling the people that are in prison that, and that is what we're telling our tax-paying citizens, is a reason why we're paying for these prisons, is because we will be able to rehabilitate these people into society. Then the federal government has to make due on their promises. If you told me I paid my time, I paid my dues, I paid my restitution, I went to your educational program, I got your degree in prison, where the fuck am I supposed to be hired at? Then you will then have an actual case against the federal government that they misled you. So the reason why we don't have those cases was like, well, yeah, you could have just applied over here. We would have hired you. Yeah, that's one of the reasons. Does that make more sense, Monica? Yep, you just have to be honest on your application and let them know that you're a felon, because there are roles earmarked. And for that very reason, the federal government charges us tax-paying dollars and creates educational programs for felons. Felons are in there learning Dora the Explorer. They go in on a burglary charge and come out Dora. They come out Senor Marco, right? So the government is actually upskilling, providing vocational and educational programs, rehabilitating, trying to decrease the rate of recidivism. How do we do that? We have to have jobs available. We have to have education available. We have to have upskilling available. We have to have tech available. We have to have remote roles available. We have to have roles available for these people that are coming out of the out of our prison sentence prisons. We say you need to go over here and sit down for a second and learn from your mistakes. And then we say that, hey, if you served 5 years, you should have learned your lesson. In those 5 years, you should have gotten a degree. So you come out, we have to have a role for you. We have to back that promise. And so for felons, that is one of the sneaky ways, I want to say, that Black on the Job has such a high rate of placing felons in roles at competitive salaries, as we throw their ass over there in federal. I ain't about to do that. Yes, not considered because you lied. Now, you can't lie I throw that felony at the top of the damn thing. When they ask you if you have a felony, yes, because they have roles and places within federal government. Now, are we gonna put your burglar ass out there in the Department of Defense? No, not about to lie to you. You might be over there in the Department of Interior, but what you won't be is on the streets with no job. And so that is the way that we back the promise. If we are determining that we are saying, if you do these things, you are considered okay to go back into society. Employment is one of the biggest hallmark on whether or not a society is viable. Think about it. When you start watching the news and you're hearing about these different countries, they always mention unemployment rates. They always mention that because it determines the economy, right? And that's what's making us number one. Number one. So, yes, if you're a felon, as long as you ain't did the dramas of them all, you do have a place within federal government. Do not lie. They know everything. Don't lie. What is a civilian resume versus a federal one? That's a good question, Tamika. So a federal resume is going to have KSA on them, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Yes, okay. I want to make sure it just said sample resume in my little notes, so I want to make sure I was looking at the right piece of paper. The federal resume is a little bit different. You put your full address on it. You do have to put your citizenship. Tracy asked earlier, if you have persons, you see Schedule A, we'll put your special hiring authority, veterans, person with disabilities, senior citizens, felon. If you have federal experience, so again, not if you have state experience, but federal, your secret clearance card, where you, and we'll talk about that more in the workshop. The objectives, your skill set, as well as your key skills and indicators. And so there are a few different nuances with the federal government because your resume is your application. So you know how we be complaining like, oh my gosh, the job asked me for my resume, then they have me fill this long ass application. Federal government don't work that way. Your resume is your application. That's another reason why there's transparency around the hiring process and they give you the interview questions ahead of time, because they have to make that process very just and fair. I can't go in and say, well, what did they ask you, Tracy, for this role? Oh, they asked me different questions. The reason why I didn't get that job is because they gave you those questions, but they gave me these ones. Absolutely not. Federal government, not Uncle Sam, not about to allow your ass to sue them. No. These were the questions we asked everybody. Here, that's what we asked them. We got to have a transparent process. Okay. Felony freely. Yes, Adrian, if you cannot make it, we do have federal career coaching, federal resume review. You'll also get access to the recording in the classroom if you get the workshop. So if you're able to get the workshop but not attend, you will get access to the recording. And if you get one of the packages with it, you have discounted services. So that way, if you want to get the resume done, or if you want to get career coaching, you can. So the packages are there, but we will be going over your federal resume, mastering USAJOBS, understanding the federal hiring process, how to maximize your application like we just saw, knowing what your job announcements are, if you're Schedule A, if you're a military spouse, if you're a veteran. That's another reason why there's a lot of roles for military spouses, because they move a lot. And we know that job hopping usually looks very negatively in federal government. I mean, within corporate, but in the federal government, they can't discriminate for that reason, right? As well as gaining your security clearance and the knowledges and importance around that. Not every role of the federal government requires a security clearance, but for those that do, that are paying for that and all that stuff, we do show you how to go through that as well. Okay. So when you get to our federal workshop, which is tomorrow with Admin Joe, and I will be in the background as a student, you will be getting that information. But this is a reason why we want to bring this to us, especially to our community space. In the Black community, we just really don't know about that. We know, I believe that, and I will say that maybe, and this is probably a wild statement to make, but I'm going to make it. I would say that every American family has at least one person in their family that's worked for the military. And so we do know the federal government, if you worked for the federal government as a like um as a soldier, right? Or within army or the Navy or the military, in any of those, we know Air Force, we know that, right? So we know federal government from that lens. I would say every American family has at least one person who has been in the military, some form, fashion in there. But we as a Black community, we're not as familiar with federal government. And sometimes we get confused on the difference between state and federal. We have a lot of people that work for the state. And so we think that those applications and those processes are the same, and it's not, right? Because even if you're a teacher, you work for the state. And that's the reason why you will see some blends, because it is a state government, right? The state government. And we'll see some blends, like how the teacher salaries are posted and things like that, and how they move up. And it is very similar to the federal government. However, things that are similar doesn't always mean the same. To give you an example, when we're looking right now at Diddy's case, right? Diddy, so the United States of America against Diddy, the way that arrests usually happen, right, is the state police, someone calls in a crime, sees you of a crime, they accuse you of a crime, and you're arrested, right? And then you can bail out, and that after you're arrested, your case is built, right? So first you're arrested, then we go around collecting all the evidence and discovery and all that, right? And then we go to trial. Federal works different. Same parts are happening, but in different order, right? So when the feds bring a case against you, they build their whole case, then they come arrest you, right? So the case that we're seeing in the indictment we're seeing on Diddy, that case been going on probably for some years. They build that full case, then they come after your ass because they gotta have all their I's dotted and their T's crossed. They gotta have a strong case to come after you because the feds, I mean, the government is lost. Not everybody who goes against and not everybody the government goes against, actually gets arrested and serves time. They actually sometimes the government loses, the people loses. But the good thing is that they built their case first. So even though we have the federal government, we have state government, and we may have all the same type of people in play in the same type of things happening, there are nuances, right? They already built that case. They got the baby oil. They didn't arrest that man, then go find the baby oil. No, they had everything they needed. Then they come get your ass. They come get you last. You the last piece of the pie. But in state, right, local citizens, we're the first piece. First we get arrested, and then they built the case. Does that make sense? The post office, yep. We up in there, yep, Adrian, we are in the post office. Yes, we are. We sure are in the post office. And those roles too, yep, we are in the post office. So again, it's a different process. And I think that is, let me see something. Federal positions. I want to see how many are Black each year. Okay. And one thing that's interesting is that Black workers are overrepresented in the federal government, which has longer hires than the private sector. So Black Americans make up 13% of the US government, but we hold 18% of federal government jobs, right? So 18%, even though we're making up 13% of the population, we hold 18% in federal government. So, and we don't get fired over there, okay? All right, y'all. So I hope I answered all your questions. Y'all can get your tickets. I pinned mine at the bottom, but think about it. Go over the information. I also put a post up today that linked all the posts that we did today in our weekly little recap. And I went over how to secure the role, different tech roles and AIs, roles in management to where you're not managing people, but products, projects, operations, and systems. We had somebody this week that had cybersecurity role. We also talked about how to use depression and the skills you get from depression, right? Why job hopping is not a bad thing in the federal government, the difference in resumes, industry representation by Black professions, and the different roles within federal government that make six figures. So I'm about to go to Arizona Eat Week, Restaurant Week, and go get fat. But I'll see you guys tomorrow in class, and hopefully this answered all your questions. Okay, guys? See you tomorrow.